It's game time again. Like and subscribe to stay ahead with all our content. This is a book move. The opening is called King's Pawn Game.
Pawn to c5.
This is a book move. The opening is called Sicilian Defense.
This is a book move. The opening is called Sicilian Defense, modern variations.
Pawn to d4.
This is a book move. The opening is called Sicilian Defense.
Taking the pawn on pawn to d4 with knight captures on d4 pins the black knight on f6, preparing to develop other pieces and control the center of the board.
This is a book move. The opening is called Sicilian Defense, modern variations, main line.
Knight to c3.
This is a book move. The opening is called Sicilian Defense, Najdorf Variation.
Pawn to f4.
Pawn to e6.
Developing the queen, putting pressure on black's position and preparing to control the center with d4. The move also pins black's knight on f6, creating a potential weakness.
Queen to b6.
Developing the knight to a strong central square, preparing to control the pawn to d5 square and potentially pinning the black knight on d7.
Queen to c7 is a solid move, supporting the pawn on pawn to e4 and preparing to develop the rest of the pieces. It also puts pressure on black's position, particularly on the queen side.
Pawn to g4 is best.
Pawn to b5 is best.
Pawn to g5 is best. This attacks the knight. This move gains a tempo.
Pawn to b4 is best. This attacks the knight. This move gains a tempo.
Knight to b5.
Pawn captures on b5 is best. This captures a higher value piece.
Pawn captures on f6.
Knight to d7.
Bishop captures on b5 is the best move.
Queen to b6 pins the knight on g3, preparing to develop the rest of the queenside pieces and putting pressure on black's position.
A pinning move to attack black's king, forcing them to move the king away from the queen, creating a potential weakness on the king's side.
Bishop captures on d7 is best. This develops a bishop.
Bishop to e3 is best. This attacks the queen. This develops a bishop.
Queen to b7 is best. This defends a rook on e8.
Pawn captures on g7.
Bishop captures on g7 is the best move.
Bishop to d4 is good. This offers a trade. This attacks the bishop. Queenside castle is best.
Bishop captures on d4 is best. This is a trade.
Knight captures on d4 is the best move.
Rook to g8.
Rook to f1 is the best move.
Rook captures on e2 is best. This develops a rook. This captures a free pawn.
King to b1.
Queen to a7 is best. This defends a rook on atwell. This creates a checkmate threat.
Knight to b3.
Rook to a6 attacks the kingside pawn structure, preparing to potentially create a pass pawn on the queen side. It also pins the black knight on b5, limiting its mobility and potential for counterplay.
Pawn to f5 is excellent. This offers a trade. Queen to h3 is best. This attacks the pawn.
Pawn to e5 is best.
Attacking the kingside pawn structure, pinning the knight on b5, and preparing to launch a potential kingside attack. This move is a key part of the Amsterdam Variation, aiming to take advantage of black's weakened kingside pawns.
Bishop to a4 is best. This creates a checkmate threat.
Queen captures on h7 is good. This attacks the rook. This captures a free pawn. Queen to e2 is best. This defends a pawn on f4.
Attacking the kingside pawn structure, rook to f8 prepares to potentially create a passed pawn on the f-file, putting pressure on black's position and preparing for a potential kingside attack.
Knight to d2 is excellent. This defends a pawn on f4. Knight to c1 is best.
Developing the bishop to a strong central square, preparing to control the pawn to d5 square and potentially putting pressure on black's position.
I played knight to b3 to attack black's pawn on c5, preparing to develop the rest of my pieces and potentially creating a pin on black's knight on c6. This move also supports the central pawn structure and prepares to potentially play d4, further controlling the center of the board.
Attacking the black pawn on pawn to e4 with bishop captures on e4 creates a strong initiative, putting pressure on the black position. The pin on the knight on pawn to f6 is also a consideration, as it can be used to gain a strategic advantage.
Rook from file h to e1 is best. This attacks the bishop. This develops a rook.
Attacking the black king with the queen, putting pressure on the black position and preparing to develop the rest of the pieces. The move also pins the black queen on the square e8, limiting her mobility.
Queen to g7.
Pawn to f6.
Attacking the kingside pawn structure, queen to g4 aims to put pressure on black's position, preparing to potentially launch a kingside attack. The move also pins black's knight on g6, limiting its mobility.
Preparing to develop the queenside pieces and putting pressure on black's position, bishop to f3 is a solid choice, controlling the pawn to d5 square and preparing to potentially play d4, while also eyeing black's pawn on f5.
Queen to c4 is best. This attacks the pawn. This move gains a tempo.
I played bishop captures on d1 to gain a strong initiative and open lines for my rooks, putting pressure on black's position and preparing to launch a potential attack on the kingside.
Queen to e6 check.
King to d8 is a defensive move, preventing checkmate on the king. By moving the king to d8, I'm also preparing to castle kingside, which will help to block potential attacks on the king.
Rook captures on d1.
Queen to c6.
Attacking the kingside pawn structure, pinning the knight on b3, and preparing to develop the rest of the queenside pieces, while also putting pressure on the kingside.
Queen to d7, pinning the black king on s7, preparing to launch a potential attack on the black position, while also supporting the pawn on pawn to d5 and putting pressure on the black position.
Queen to d5 pins the black knight on f6, preparing to launch a potential attack on the kingside. This move also puts pressure on the black pawn on f5, potentially creating a weakness.
King to e7.
Rook to g1 is best. By placing the rook on an open file, it controls important columns.
Rook to f7 is excellent. King to d8 is best.
Rook to ga.
Attacking the black pawn on f5, creating a potential weakness and gaining a small material advantage. This move also opens up the b file for potential rook activity, putting pressure on the black position.
Queen captures on f5 pins the black knight on s6, gaining a strong initiative and preparing to launch a potential attack on the black position.
Queen captures on f5.
Force check on black's king, pinning the knight on d7 and preparing to launch a potential attack on the black position.
Queen to d7, pinning the knight on b5, preparing to launch a potential attack on the black position, while also supporting the pawn on d6, creating a strong pawn center and controlling the d file.
Queen to c4.
Pawn to f5 is good. Pawn to b3 is best. This offers a trade.
Queen to h4 check.
King to e6.
Rook to g6 check.
King to d5 is a strong move, attacking black's pawn on pawn to d5 and preparing to develop the rest of the pieces. It also puts pressure on black's position, forcing them to respond to the potential threat.
Queen captures on b4 is a strong move, pinning the knight on pawn to b5 and gaining control of the b file. This move also puts pressure on black's position, forcing them to respond to the potential fork on the king's side.
King to c6 is mistake. A chance to attack a rook with our g7 was missed. The opponent can play qc4+. Rook to g7 is best. This offers a trade. This attacks the rook. By placing the rook on an open file, it controls important columns. This move gains a tempo.
Queen to f4 check.
King to d5 is the best move.
Queen to f5 check is best.
King to c6 is a solid move, supporting the pawn on pawn to e4 and preparing to develop the rest of the pieces. It also slightly weakens the king side, but this is mitigated by the presence of the bishop on cone, which can potentially pin the knight on c6.
Queen captures on e5 is the best move.
Queen to b7 is best. This pins a piece of the opponent to their king.
Rook to b3 is best. This attacks the queen.
Queen to a7.
Rook to c3 check.
King to b7 is good. Queen to c5 is brilliant. This offers a trade. This attacks the queen. This blocks a check to the king with a piece. This sacrifices the queen.
Queen to d5 check pins the black king on d5, forcing Daiki to respond to the check, while also putting pressure on the black pawn structure on d5, creating a potential weakness. The game is over. White wins.